Laena Velaryon had to be one of the most important characters in House of the Dragon, whether we realized it or not. This was a woman once in line to be the next queen of Westeros after the death of Aemma Arryn. This was the only daughter of Rhaenys Targaryen, the queen who never was, and the sea snake Corlys Velaryon, a renowned sailor and the richest man in the realm. This was the Rider of Vhagar, the largest dragon in the world, wife of Daemon Targaryen, the rogue prince, and mother of his two daughters, Baela and Rhaena. This was the sister to Laenor Velaryon, the former heir to Driftmark, aunt and sister-in-law to Rhaenyra Targaryen, the heir, through her marriage to her uncle Daemon and her marriage to her brother, Laenor. This was a woman with a lot of connections, and despite her short-lived time on screen, her death had many lasting effects on the story as we know it. Laena Velaryon was a very headstrong woman, and it seems that despite being born of both fire and sea, she seemed to identify with the more fiery part of her blood, going from being a timid girl to a sensible yet confident and outgoing woman, a fitting partner for the rogue prince. But after her marriage to Daemon, the two seemed to want very different things out of life. After a life of mischief, Daemon seemed like he finally wanted to get away from it all, put the politics and ambition behind him in exchange for an easy life in Essos, while Laena wanted for more, like he once did, once upon a time. While she loved her husband and daughters and the life they shared, she desired for more than just some soft seat in Essos. She wanted more for herself, for her daughters and unborn child. She wanted them to experience her home. She wanted to embrace her Valyrian heritage instead of trying to lock it away in the same way Daemon had. She was the blood of the dragon too, and so she wished to burn. To live a dragon rider's life and die a dragon rider's death. A wish that you could argue was granted to her. Upon delivering their third child, Laena Velaryon encountered complications during the pregnancy. Like Aemma Arryn in the beginning of the series, it was unlikely that she or the baby would survive if things were left with the gods to do what they would. So like his brother Viserys, Prince Daemon was offered a choice. He could leave things to go naturally and risk losing both wife and child, or he could operate. Cut Laena open while she was still alive just to save his child. Daemon refused this though, and rather than be cut open or left to die in agony, Laena decides to take her fate in her own hands, to choose her own death. So she makes her dragon Vhagar burn her, ending her life and that of her unborn child, leaving a hole in the hearts of all of her family. Her husband, her daughters, her mother, father, and brother. And aside from all the grief, there were some serious fallouts from her death. Laena's death allowed Aemon to claim Vhagar, which sparked the fight in the cave that ultimately cost him his eye. Her death also provided an opening for Daemon and Rhaenyra to be married to one another after the eye incident. But what if this did not come to pass? What if Laena didn't die a dragon rider's death in fire and blood, but was able to live, to see her girls become women, proper ladies, and dragon riders? What if instead of dying in childbirth or the fires of her dragon Vhagar, Laena Velaryon lived? We'll set the stage in episode 6. Laena has gone into labor with her third child by Daemon Targaryen. The room is filled with her agonized wails as she tries to deliver, and the people fuss about her as Daemon waits outside. He seems mostly unbothered. Laena has already done this twice before, at the same time, no less. Their daughters, Baela and Rhaena, are known as the Dragon Twins, at least in the books, for a reason. But Daemon is still slightly concerned, though he doesn't really show it. He remembers Aemma, his brother's late wife, how difficult conception and delivery had been on her body until the last one killed her. He had made light of Balon's death back then. It was unintentional, he just wanted to lighten the mood, but it had been a terrible time for a jest like that. But now, after all these years, he could truly understand his brother's plight, his worry and concerns, as he now wondered if his wife would meet the same fate as Aemma. He hoped not. His girls would need their mother. Eventually, the room falls silent. Laena has stopped screaming, and something else has replaced it. The wails of a newborn. In this timeline, Laena successfully managed to deliver the child. Daemon turns into the room, where an exhausted Laena resides, and the maester approaches the prince with the newborn babe in his hands. "Congratulations, my prince. You have a son," the maester tells him. Because in the books, this is what actually happened. Laena gave birth to a stillborn son who died, and she followed him not long after. So in this timeline, she successfully manages to deliver and doesn't die on the childbed, or by dragonfire. And now not only is her family still together, it has grown. Daemon takes his son in his hands. This is his first boy, an heir of his own. Though to what, since he has no titles or holdings to his name, is unclear. But he savors the moment regardless and names him Mycor Targaryen, the first and only son of Laena and the Rogue Prince. Another head for the dragon. With the survival of Laena and the birth of a son to them, a lot ends up changing in the House of the Dragon. For starters, there's an extra Targaryen and potential dragon rider in the family now, and with the survival of Laena, that pretty much means every event that was caused by her death is now non-existent. Episode 7 is a perfect example, since it was literally centered around Laena's death and the consequences. Because she lives, along with her newborn son, there will be no funeral on Driftmark. King Viserys, Alicent, Otto, Aegon, Helaena, Aemond will all stay in King's Landing. Rhaenyra, Laenor, Jace, Luke, and Joffrey will probably still be on Dragonstone. Laena, her daughters, Daemon, and their newborn son will still be in Pentos. There is no reason for any of them to go back to Driftmark anytime soon, especially since delivery would have been very taxing on Laena's body. There is no point in making her travel back and forth just to see people. If anything, it makes more sense for them to just wait for Laena to recover before they go and visit anyone. Or that Daemon just sends word to her family so that they can all come and see her. So that entire funeral that we get in episode 7, along with everything else after that, just gets erased. Like Aemond claiming Vhagar. If Laena lives, this means that Aemond remains dragonless. In canon, when Aemond was on Driftmark, he saw an opening when it came to Vhagar, a dragon without a rider, so he went to claim her. That won't be happening here. This means that whole fight in the cave over who really should have had Vhagar and the insults does not happen. So Aemond doesn't lose his eye, and if he never loses his eye, this may mean Lucerys gets to live longer since he won't want vengeance for it years later. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Laena surviving basically rewrites the entire Driftmark episode. So if Driftmark doesn't happen, what does? Perhaps we could say that after the birth of Mycor, Daemon sends word about the birth of his new son. The news reaches Corlys and Rhaenys, which makes its way to Laenor, and through him it gets to Rhaenyra. And Daemon also notifies his brother Viserys. We'll say in this new version of episode 7, everyone gathers at Driftmark to meet the baby, coming together for life instead of death. And it's here where our changes start taking place. This time, everyone isn't grieving, they're celebrating, though some are more apprehensive about it than others. Like Jacaerys, Harwin is still dead in this timeline, so despite celebrating the birth of Daemon's new son, he's still moping around because of that. But like in canon, Rhaenyra still tells him to keep up appearances. But she is a bit more caring towards Jace this time around, since today is supposed to be a happy day. It would have been suspicious for him to heavily grieve Harwin Strong, a man they claim to have no relation to, over his aunt by blood who is dead. But here, his aunt is alive and well, so he can be a little more open about his grief towards Harwin. Related or not, he was still a family friend at the least. People can surely understand that. And Luke in this timeline also feels a bit better than he did in canon. In the original timeline, he was pretty torn up about all the death that was going on around him. First it was Harwin Strong who died, then Laena died, and then Corlys started lecturing him on his future as Lord of the Tides. Since Laena is alive, he feels a bit better than he did before. But with the death of Harwin, who was more of a father to him than his seemingly real father, Laena Velaryon, he's still grieving just a bit. Another change I think we could see here is the relationship between Aemond and Rhaena. It's no secret that Aemond and Rhaena did not start off well in the main timeline. After Aemond claimed Vhagar, he basically made an enemy out of Rhaena immediately for that reason alone. To Aemond, Vhagar was exactly what she was, a dragon. There are no rules on who gets a dragon and who doesn't. They aren't like lands and titles passed from one person to the next just because of who your parents are. So in his eyes, she was fair game. But to Rhaena, Vhagar had sentimental value. In her eyes, Vhagar had only ever been her mother's dragon, and for someone she barely even knows to just take her so soon after her mother's death was like a slap in the face. And it's for that reason that she felt entitled to Vhagar. It was her mother's dragon, all she had left, so it should belong to her. I go over all of this in a separate video specifically dedicated to Aemond as well, so feel free to check that video out here on the channel if you haven't already. I also mentioned in that video just how sad it is that Aemond and Rhaena ended up being enemies, because when you really take a look at them, they are very similar characters. Both Aemond and Rhaena are Targaryens without dragons. Being a Targaryen without a dragon is kinda like being a bird without wings to them. They feel like they're not living up to their ancestry, that Valyrian heritage. They feel less than and looked over by their families as a result of this. One of them is even bullied for it.
Your father would tell you the same.
Father ignores me.
Beyond understanding.
They gave me a pig!
A what?
They said they found a dragon for me,
The last ring has no legs at all.
but it was a pig. They all laughed.
It's clear that having a dragon means a lot to both of them. It's a defining trait for a Targaryen after all, but whatever common ground they could have found with one another through this is erased through Aemond claiming Vhagar. But this time, Laena is alive. They don't have a dragon to fight over, and Aemond won't be so high on newfound courage that he directs that anger he has for the strong boys towards Rhaena.
Vhagar has a new rider now.
She was mine to claim.
Then you should have claimed her. Maybe your cousins can find you a pig to ride. It would suit you.
So I'd like to think that in this timeline, Aemond and Rhaena get off on a better foot, or wing since they are Targaryens. And maybe this lack of a dragon that they both seem to share is something that brings them together instead of drives them apart. In the canon timeline, Rhaena seemed very insecure about her place in the family. Her father seemed to prefer her sister Baela because she had a dragon, and the Lords of Pentos wanted dragon riders to stay and help them with any possible conflicts that might arise. She believes that since she's not a dragon rider, then they don't want her. She doesn't feel very confident in herself because of not having a dragon. Good enough for her father and the Lords of Pentos. And now, with the birth of her baby brother in this timeline, she may feel even lesser. This is her father's first son, and possibly a future dragon rider unlike her. Like Rhaenyra felt towards Aegon in the canon timeline, she may also feel replaceable.
Because you mean to replace me with Alicent Hightower's son, the boy you always wanted.
He wants you and father. And Baela. Because you have dragons.
And this could be something that she and Aemond bond over. He's a second son. He's not in line to inherit anything other than what he claims for himself. He's been bullied for who knows how long for not having a dragon, something synonymous with being a Targaryen. And his nephews are bastards. They're seen as impure, evil incarnate by the kingdoms of Westeros by default, and yet they have dragons and not him. No doubt that would make him feel insecure about his place as the blood of the dragon, a true-born Targaryen coming second to bastards in almost every way, through dragons and inheritance. So who better to know what Rhaena's going through than him? Maybe I'm reaching here, but I do find it interesting. So we'll say that during the celebration of Daemon's new son, Rhaena is off sulking, wondering about her place in the family with the birth of her brother, kinda like Rhaenyra did in episode 3. This is when Aemond appears. He seems awkward about the whole thing. He doesn't even know Rhaena like that. But she's his cousin, so like Jace did to Baela when Laena died, he comforts her. The two just start talking and find they have a fair bit in common. So this sets a new foundation for their relationship moving forward. Speaking of relationships, another thing that Laena Living ends up changing are the pairings of both Daemon and Rhaenyra. With Laena remaining alive in this timeline, this means that Rhaenyra and Daemon do not get married. In the canon timeline, Daemon's marriage to Laena was a very symbolic thing in nature. Laena was born of the sea, and Daemon was born of the fire. Daemon was always an ambitious and reckless man. He didn't really care for the opinions of others, he still doesn't really, and did whatever he had it in mind to do. He would kill, he would cheat, he would lie and belittle. He'd take 10 steps at a time just to take one step towards what he truly wanted. There was nothing Daemon wouldn't do. But when he married Laena, that changed. He removed himself from his family, distanced himself from the throne he coveted for years, abandoned the gold cloaks he put so much work into building, left behind the niece he cared for and the brother he loved more than anyone else, all for some cozy life as a guest in someone else's house. Daemon's marriage to Laena, to this woman of the waves, was him actively dousing his inner fire. He chained himself, cooled himself down, and when she died, those restrictions he placed on himself were gone. So when Rhaenyra came to him, fire joined to fire. It woke the dragon inside of him, for better or worse. But now Laena lives, and she just gave birth to his son. He may not love her or care for her to the same extent he does Rhaenyra, but he cares for her regardless. She's the mother of his children. So even if Rhaenyra shows up and the two meet for the first time in years and the old feelings resurface, I doubt he'll be as indulgent of them as he was before. As I just said, one of the reasons Daemon appeared rather subdued and tempered is all because of Laena. Her death provided him with a way to pursue Rhaenyra without restraint, especially since she and Laenor were platonic in their relationship and had an agreement going on. Now, he could still have a relationship with Rhaenyra outside of Laena, considering he did cheat on Rhea Royce pretty regularly in the beginning of the series, but I doubt that will happen this time. Laena living is the death of Rhaenyra and Daemon's romance. He used her as a way to keep himself in check, and even after she died, Daemon didn't just rush back to Rhaenyra. He said he wanted to go back to Pentos until he changed his mind. So as long as Laena lives, Daemon will always place a leash on himself because he has a reason to. And Laena doesn't just affect Daemon and Rhaenyra, it also affects Laenor. If Laena lives, so does her brother, even though he technically never actually died to begin with. The whole scheme to fake Laenor's death so Daemon can marry Rhaenyra will not happen. One of the reasons this was even able to happen was because Laena died. This means Daemon was unwed, and the only way for him to marry Rhaenyra without any backlash would mean she would have to be unwed too. With Daemon attaching himself to Laena, I doubt he's just going to try and annul his marriage to the mother of his 3 children just to get with his niece, especially at this stage of his life where he's trying so hard not to be anywhere near the court or politics. Another reason why this plan even happened is because Laenor was slipping. He was aloof and overly indulgent, drowning his sorrows by drowning in his pleasures. Because he was so caught up in himself, he neglected his sons. And not just that, he neglected Rhaenyra. The walls were closing in on their family, and where was he? Off getting drunk and having fun with Qarl. His failures as not only a father, but a husband and family man came to light with the eye incident, when his sons got beat up and Aemond lost his eye. Then the legitimacy of his sons was put to question in public, and his wife was attacked, and where was he? With the death of his sister and the assault on his family, Laenor realized his failings and offered to be a better man, but instead Rhaenyra and Daemon found a way to let him off his leash. In this timeline, with Laena living and no conflict that results from the legitimacy of his sons being put openly to question, Laenor never comes to this realization that he was terrible. He remains the same overly indulgent man, and since Daemon and Laena are still married, there is no plan to get rid of him just so Daemon can get with Rhaenyra and protect her throne. I know some people may argue that Laena would be fine if Daemon got with Rhaenyra anyway because she says,
Life has, I know, disappointed you. Perhaps I too am not the wife you would have wished for yourself.
Laena.
It does not pain me. I have made my peace.
But despite being aware of where Daemon's heart lies, I doubt she'd just give the go-ahead for the father of her 3 children to just go off and do whatever with another woman. Regardless of that though, Laena living means both the Velaryon siblings stay relevant to the story. And since Daemon never married Rhaenyra or potentially has any kind of romantic relationship with her, this would effectively erase her sons Aegon and Viserys, meaning Rhaenyra would only have Jace, Luke, and Joffrey as her heirs, unless she took another lover. Laena may not agree to Daemon running away to marry his niece, but maybe she'd be okay with them sleeping together so she can have more bastards. At least their bastards would look a little more like Velaryons, but I find that situation happening unlikely. Moving on though, Episode 8 would also change a lot, because with Laenor still being in the picture, there is no question who the rightful heir to Driftmark really is. In Episode 8, the whole argument for Vaemond inheriting Driftmark was that Lucerys was not the trueborn son of Laenor Velaryon, who is presumed dead, so he shouldn't be allowed to inherit. But here, Laenor is alive and well, and there is no question that he is the Sea Snake's son. So it makes no sense for anyone to challenge Laenor, who is clearly the rightful heir, especially with Corlys there to back him up. In canon, the main reason that there was even a succession dispute, and why Vaemond even put himself forward as heir, was because his brother Corlys might die. After the death of his daughter and son, Corlys went over the edge, drowning his sorrows in adventure and battle until it almost killed him. This uncertainty about his survival drove Vaemond to push for his inheritance, But those tragic events that led Corlys down this path do not happen. His daughter and son are alive. He never got injured on the sea, so there is no question about his health, and he has at least one indisputable true-born heir in Laenor. If anyone wanted to fight for Driftmark in the legal sense, it would have to happen after Corlys died and Laenor ascended. The argument would become, who is Laenor's heir? But I digress. Because there is no succession dispute, this most likely means that there will not be a Last Supper for Viserys Targaryen. One of the main reasons that the Targaryens even sat down and had dinner together is because there was a succession dispute. This single event brought majority of the Targaryen family together in one place after spending years apart. This prompted King Viserys to seize the moment and bring all his family together one last time. But that's different now. Viserys and Alicent's family reside in King's Landing. Rhaenyra and Laenor's family reside on Dragonstone, and they haven't been home in years, isolating themselves. And Daemon and Laena's family will most likely still be on Pentos. In this timeline, Daemon keeps himself removed from court and politics like he tried to do in canon. Laena's death and Rhaenyra's advancements caused him to do otherwise in the original timeline. But, as I said before, Daemon's marriage to Laena was him actively dousing his own fire. With Laena alive, he'll continue to do that, even if Laena desires otherwise. So unless some really important events like a succession being disputed or a death in the family occurs, this means that the House of the Dragon remains divided. And Viserys most likely dies with his wish for a unified, peaceful family unfulfilled. This already happened in canon, but he at least got to see what could be with his family being together one last time. But not this time. And since there is no succession dispute, no Last Supper for the king, this means that Alicent and Rhaenyra never make amends like they did in canon. This also means that Rhaenyra never has a conversation with Viserys where she asks him to defend her and her sons in public. And if that doesn't happen, if Alicent still visits him before he dies, Viserys won't think he's talking to Rhaenyra when he starts talking about Aegon's dream. So it would be impossible for her to mistake his confusion for his approval to make Aegon the king. But Aegon becoming king will most likely still happen because Alicent in episode 8, before dinner, didn't really seem to care for Rhaenyra all that much. It was only at dinner where she put their differences aside and decided to let the past be the past. So we don't have that same regretful, sympathizing, and forgiving Alicent as we did before. Instead, we still have that more vindictive Alicent who just wants Aegon on the throne. But even then, regardless of who this Alicent turns out to be, Otto was planning to install Aegon on the throne regardless. Which brings us to the most important parts of the video. Does the dance still happen? Yes, but the more unclear answer is who's on which side. With Laena and Daemon still together, there is effectively another branch of the Targaryen family out there with dragons of their own. They'd have Caraxes through Daemon, Vhagar through Laena, Moondancer through Baela, potentially another dragon since Mycor is here now, but he'd be around 6 and too young to fight. And then there's Rhaena. In canon, she went years without a dragon after Vhagar was claimed by Aemond. It's like she gave up on having a dragon in the show. Or maybe it's just waiting for Aemond to croak so she can swipe Vhagar back, which is unlikely, but it does beg the question. If Laena is still alive and she was probably the most reassuring figure in Rhaena's life like she was in canon, would she let her daughter go dragonless for years? Or would she make her claim one? I mean, she does say in canon that if she wants to be a dragon rider, that is a right you have to claim.
You have a harder road. Baela's dragon was born to her. But if you wish to be a rider, you must claim that right.
This also brings up a question about Aemond as well. Like Rhaena, having a dragon meant practically everything to him. It was something he was mocked for not having for years, and like Rhaena, his mother was really his only support in this endeavor. Though she couldn't understand him, she encouraged him and said he would have a dragon one day all the same.
You will have a dragon one day.
You'll have to close an eye.
I know it.
So it begs the question, would Alicent let her son go without a dragon? Would Aemond let himself? Despite being in a better headspace, having not lost his eye and having the incident overlooked by his father, I doubt Aemond would just forget how he was bullied and his desire for a dragon. So if Aemond and Rhaena did get dragons, who would they claim? There are unclaimed and wild dragons on Dragonstone. Perhaps if they were able to, Aemond and Rhaena could claim Vermithor and Silverwing. Vermithor and Silverwing were the dragons of old King Jaehaerys and his wife, Alysanne. Vermithor, also known as the Bronze Fury, is the second largest dragon after Vhagar. You see him briefly when Daemon goes into the dragon pit and starts singing to an unknown dragon. This is Vermithor. And this could be an interesting dynamic. Upon hearing the death of his brother, most likely from Rhaenyra, the dragon will wake in Daemon once again. He'll arrive at the same conclusion as he did in canon, that his brother was murdered. And Laena, with an itching to make good on her dragon blood and not wanting to leave her brother out to dry, she and Daemon would most likely support the Blacks in this endeavor unconditionally. This would give the Blacks Syrax, Vermax, Arax, Caraxes, Vhagar, Moondancer, Meleys, Seasmoke, since Laenor will still be around, and possibly Silverwing if Rhaena claims her. Potentially 9 fighting dragons, while the Greens have Sunfire, Dreamfire, Tessarion, and potentially Vermithor if Aemond claimed him. The odds are definitely stacked against him, but numbers aren't everything. The Blacks have more dragons than the Greens in the show too, but the Greens still put up a fight anyway. Then there is no telling how loyal everyone on each side really is, like Aemond and Rhaena. If we go with the idea that they're closer in this timeline, perhaps having a friendship that could well be a romance depending on how involved they are with each other's lives, would they really want to fight each other? Rhaena doesn't hate Aemond like she did before because of Vhagar. With the two of them switch sides, maybe Aemond goes to the Blacks, or maybe Rhaena, feeling so neglected by her father for years, is enough to push her towards joining the Greens. Or perhaps they try and fail to convince the other to change sides, which could result in a heartbreaking battle. Aemond and Rhaena could have developed feelings for one another, and their dragons, Vermithor and Silverwing, are actually mates. They have a bond in the book, so imagine two lovers having to fight and kill each other. I mean, none of it is too far-fetched considering the dance is literally just one big family feud. I mean, even outside of the Targaryens, you have twin brothers on opposite sides of the conflict. So, cousins potentially changing sides because they love one another isn't too far-fetched. I mean, you literally have an uncle who got with his niece the night of his wife's funeral and murdered a man just to fake her husband's death so he could marry her. But all in all, it's just an interesting thought that I had. That's what most of these what if videos are anyway. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, tell me what you thought in the comments, and I will see you all next time.